Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Walk and Talk. I hope you're all well. I hope you've had a fantastic week. I hope you are ready to hear me talk all things dog for the next 20 minutes because I've got an awesome episode for you today, if I do say so myself. Well, I hope you think so anyway. Now, I have to fess up right at the start, right? This is something a little bit different, I think, but it's something I feel really inspired to talk about this week because basically, for the past month, to be honest with you, I have been well and truly targeted by the algorithm as an animal behaviour enthusiast since the very sad passing of Jane Goodall at the beginning of this month. Now, to be honest, I didn't really know a great deal about her previously. And if you have no idea who she is a fantastic woman, best known for her studies of chimpanzees in the wild in Gombe in Tanzania in the 60s and onwards from there, which totally revolutionized the understanding of chimp behavior, took it to a whole new level in terms of revealing the complexity of their social lives, the fact that they make and use tools, which previously to Jane's work, by the way, was actually the defining factor of mankind, that we were thought to be the only species that did this, and so many other amazing things. Too many to list, right? There's an awesome documentary on Disney Plus called, I think it's just called Jane, if you want to learn more about her life and her work. But essentially, I knew very little about her until after her death. Suddenly, I got served a lot of Instagram reels of her speaking, probably because she once famously said that she preferred dogs to chimps. So, boom, that's going to show up in my feed, right? and loads of other Instagram quotes of hers and all of that kind of stuff. And so, for the past few weeks, I basically just fell down a rabbit warren of Jane Goodall facts because I just wanted to know more about this incredible, inspirational lady and the work she did. I found it fascinating. I watched her documentary, I read her book, and now I want to talk about her in this week's episode because I think the work she did with chimpanzees as a primatologist, a lot of her approach and her learnings can actually be incredibly useful to us as dog owners and dog trainers, not because dogs are anything like chimps, but because what Jane did when she dedicated years of her life to getting so close to these animals in the wild that she was truly able to discover who they were, what they were about, like no one else had previously been capable, in many ways holds the same essence as what we do every day when we choose to train, to communicate with, and truly see our dogs and their struggles and their drives. Because what Jane did for chimpanzees, what she did for science, wasn't just about discovering that they use tools or that they had complex social hierarchies. It was about showing the world that animals are thinking, feeling, emotional beings, that they do have relationships, they do have desires, frustrations, they experience playfulness, and of course, they experience grief. Spoiler alert on that note, actually, if you are going to watch Jane on Disney Plus, it's quite sad at the end. I did shed a tear. Still worth a watch, though, if you're interested in that kind of thing. Anyway, I think that message, that deep respect for the emotional life of animals, is something that dog trainers and dog owners need to keep at the heart of everything we do. So, today, in this episode, I want to explore what I am going to call the Goodall Effect. And that is how Jane's work in ethology can help us transform the way we understand and train our dogs. So, over the course of this episode, we'll talk about how to see your dog through the ethologist's eye, to observe them, to question, to empathize, and to discover what's really driving their behavior. We will talk about curiosity over control, compassion over correction, and why, when we learn how to watch before we act, our whole relationship with our dog begins to change for the better. So, before I dive into it, the first thing that's worth highlighting here is that Jane Goodall was not a qualified scientist or behaviourist. She did not come from an academically experienced background at all. She didn't arrive in Gombe with a clipboard and a degree in zoology. She literally arrived with a little notebook, a pair of binoculars, and a boatload of wonder and enthusiasm. And that is it, which means that what she did is absolutely accessible to you as well. And I think this is one of the reasons I was so drawn into her story this month, because science at the time did not value wonder. Scientists didn't name their study subjects, they just numbered them, right? But Jane immediately broke that rule and she gave all the chimpanzees names. There was Flo, Fifi, David Greybeard, Goliath, I think, and you get to see them all if you watch the show. But the point was, she broke the mold because she didn't see them as stats or data or whatever. She truly saw them as the individuals that they were. And I think in dog training, sometimes we can be too readily taught to focus on the protocols and the techniques. And as a result, we can end up forgetting the magic of curiosity, the ability to simply observe our dogs first without trying to fix them. I know, wild idea, right? But that's basically what the ethologist's eye is all about. Observation without judgment, noticing without any labeling, asking questions rather than assuming answers. So, when you look at your dog, can you truly see them? Can you see their little flickers of emotion, the micro movements in their body language that tell you when they're feeling a little bit unsure or curious or they're about to disengage? Because most of us are so focused on the training outcome that we miss the conversation that's happening right in front of us. The little tweak of the eyebrow, the twitch of the ear, that subtle change in just their breathing or the body weight shift. But if we learn to slow down, to observe the way Jane did, we start to decode our dog's emotions with far more accuracy, and we are far better equipped to respond with empathy instead of frustration, which doesn't get us very far. So, okay, let's look at ethology in our everyday training. So, what exactly is ethology? Well, ethology, how many times am I going to say the word ethology today? We don't know. Ethology is basically the scientific study of animal behavior in their natural environment. It's the science of how and why animals behave the way they do. And Jane Goodall, alongside pioneers like Konrad Lorenz and Nico Tinbergen, helped to completely redefine it, because before Jane, behavior was basically studied in like sterile lab settings, right? Controlled environments that totally stripped away any context. But the thing is, when you remove that context, you remove meaning from the behavior. And what Jane proved was that if you want to understand an animal, you have to watch it in its own world. You have to see how it interacts with others, how it forages, plays, communicates, problem solves, all of that juicy stuff in its own environment. Now, think about that in terms of dogs. A domesticated dog's natural environment might not be the African forest, but it is still rich in social and environmental complexity. There are scents, sounds, other dogs, humans, and just a wealth of pressures that our dogs have to deal with every single day. And every one of those things shapes how they behave. Ultimately, when your dog barks or lunges, freezes, or they ignore you, that behavior is never random. It's always communication. It's always a piece of the puzzle that makes sense when we zoom out far enough. And this is where the ethologist's eye becomes powerful for dog trainers and owners, because instead of asking, how do I stop this behavior? We start asking, what is this behavior telling me? And that single shift from control to curiosity is completely transformative. So, Okay, let's get nerdy for a second, because Jane wasn't just compassionate. Despite not having a degree, she was still incredibly scientifically sharp. So when we as humans, as owners, practice observation, quiet, patient, sustained attention, we activate a network in the brain that is associated with self regulation. And studies in neuroscience show that observation increases activation in the mirror neuron system, the same brain circuitry that is involved in empathy. So basically, that means that when we are observing calmly, we are not just learning more about our dogs, we are literally feeling more attuned to them on a neurological level. And that's also why good training, quality dog training, feels connected. When you're emotionally regulated and curious, your dog mirrors that. Whereas when you're tense, when you're rushed, or you're reactive, your dog mirrors that too. So, in a way, Jane's patient fieldwork offers us the perfect model for dog training, because she didn't rush in. She didn't demand cooperation or force any kind of interaction. She just waited. She took her time and she was patient and she let trust grow. So now imagine approaching your own dog's challenges that way, not with a sense of pressure, but with the calm confidence that through observation and empathy, you will eventually uncover what it is they need. And if you want to take this advice and make it practical, here's something you can literally do this week, okay? Choose a 10-minute time period each day where you just watch your dog. No training, no cues, nothing. And absolutely, categorically, no phone in your hand. Sorry, not sorry. Observe their body language in detail. Notice how maybe their tail moves when they hear a sound. Watch what they do when they are feeling really relaxed versus when they're alert. Listen to their breathing patterns. See how they explore the space that they're in. And then just jot down what you noticed. And don't fall into the trap of trying to interpret it too soon. Literally, just describe it. You are building your ethologist's eye here. All too often, I will see owners rush straight to trying to interpret or assign meaning to their dog's behavior. But the problem with that is, by doing that, they're already deciding what the problem is, and therefore they are focusing on fixing that problem, the one that they've decided exists, when in reality, they might be steering themselves in entirely the wrong direction. Like an owner will say, oh, my dog gets really angry and starts barking at XYZ, whatever it is. But I'm like, sorry, are you sure that they are feeling angry in this scenario? Can we just like zoom out for a bit longer to make sure we really know what's going on and what the motivation is before we start assigning these emotions to the behavior? And the cool thing about just starting to ease up on this and just observing is that over time, you will start to see patterns in behavior like, oh, okay, my dog always yawns right before they disengage. Or, oh, I've noticed that he always shifts his weight backwards when he's feeling a bit unsure. Or I've noticed that she blinks really slowly when she's trying to calm herself down. And then once you start noticing, your training becomes more and more intuitive and you begin to anticipate rather than react, which means you get to the point where you can prevent problems rather than steamroll in and try to patch them up afterwards. And that's the incredible power of ethology applied to everyday life with our dogs. But if you think we're done with the amazing Jane Goodall there, we're not, guys. Let me tell you, we're absolutely not. Because Jane's legacy wasn't just scientific, it was also moral and emotional. She didn't just change what we know about animals, but she changed how we feel about them too. Her work revealed for the first time that animals have inner lives. They feel joy and sadness. They grieve, they play, they strategize. And that recognition changed the entire field of animal behavior. In dog training, we're carrying that torch forward now. Well, like a lot of us are, right? You got to be careful about a few of the bearded backwards types, but generally, so many modern dog trainers are part of that same movement. The one that says dogs are not robots, they're emotional beings. And when we start to honor that truth, everything changes because we stop asking, how do I make my dog obey? And we start asking, how do I help my dog feel safe enough to learn how to do this? Now, of course, observation is only half the story because once we've seen what our dog is communicating, we need to respond appropriately, don't we? So, if you're dealing with a reactive dog, for instance, observation helps you recognize the earliest warning signs before your dog explodes. I talked in detail about this actually on last week's episode, and I said it then, but I'll say it again. Effective reactivity training doesn't start when the barking starts. It starts when you learn to notice the flicker of tension before the reaction happens. And if you want more help with a reactive dog, you can go check out my reactivity training course. It covers how to build those emotional regulation skills before exposure to triggers, because this stuff is all about foundation before confrontation. I will leave a link in the show notes if you want to go and check it out. Another part of Jane's brilliance was how she inspired trust amongst the animals that she was studying through consistency, predictability, and quiet engagement. She simply showed up every day the same way until they realized they had come to learn she wasn't a threat. And that's the essence of engagement in dog training as well. It's not about being the loudest, most entertaining thing in the room. It's literally about being reliable, being safe, and worth trusting. And if this is something you want help with, again, I have a 21-day engagement training program, which is entirely designed to help owners rebuild that sense of connection, especially if it's been lost through frustration or distraction. It's about teaching you to become that consistent, high value presence your dog naturally gravitates toward. Again, I will pop a link in the show notes if you want to go and read more about it. But I think at its core, the Goodall Effect is about rediscovering wonder because we've definitely lost a bit of that in modern training. Nowadays, we're surrounded by metrics, progress charts, rep trackers, and yes, I'm guilty of loving that kind of data. Absolutely, I do. But sometimes we forget to simply marvel at the animal in front of us. Jane Goodall spent hours watching a chimp use a blade of grass to fish termites from a mound. And to her, that was utterly awe-inspiring. So now, when do you think was the last time you just looked at your dog with that same sense of awe? Because truly, when you stop and think about it, right, aren't our dogs absolutely incredible creatures? The way they read our emotions, the way they adapt to our human world, the way they forgive our mistakes again and again and again. I think when we make the effort to bring back that sense of wonder, training truly can become something joyful again. One of the most shared quotes of Jane Goodall's, although there were many, many, many quotes to be fair, but one that I really loved is only if we understand can we care. Only if we care will we help, and only if we help shall they be saved. And I think that quote really resonates with the kind of work I try to do too, because when dog owners truly understand their dogs, everything else falls into place. Understanding breeds compassion, and compassion changes how we act. Every walk, every training session, every moment of patience you give your dog, it really matters. You are shaping a new relationship between humans and dogs. And I would love for it to be one grounded in empathy and understanding and knowledge, not just domination. Ultimately, I think that's what I want people to take from Jane's story today, okay? Not just admiration for her courage, but a blueprint for how we can all live and train with more awareness, more patience, and more open minds. So, if you take nothing else away from this episode, take this, please. Just try and pause more, try and notice more, try to see your dog as less of a project sometimes and more of just an absolute wonder. Watch before you act. Be endlessly curious about the things your dog does, the decisions he makes, and the behaviors he chooses. Because the more you take the time to understand, ultimately, the more effective all of your training will become. Okay? Right. I think that's it for today's walk and talk. I really hope you enjoyed our little one-way chat today. I hope you found it interesting and useful. And if you feel so inclined, please go and read up on Jane yourself or watch the documentary on Disney Plus, because there's no way I have done her incredible life's work justice in the past 20 minutes. But hopefully I have managed to share enough to inspire you just a tiny little bit. If so, my work here is done. So, without further ado, I will leave you to enjoy the rest of your dog walk. If you are interested in any of the online training programs I have mentioned today, you can find the details in the show notes or head over to my website, which is listendogtraining.com. If you want to follow me on Instagram or TikTok, I mean, I'm devastated that you haven't already, but look, there's always room for one more. I'm at Listen Dog Training. Otherwise, I shall see you same time next week for another episode of The Walk and Talk.